Hello, girls. Next topic is sources of contamination, right? So, if we're discussing sources of contamination, so number one is the food. When we talk of the food, food has everything, right? So, since food provides us nutrition, if it can provide nutrition to us, definitely it is also a nutrition source for microbes. So, if it's a nutrition source for microbes, these microbes can grow, these can proliferate, and thus their number can increase on a particular food. So while these microbes can be introduced in a various ways, from harvesting, when you harvest a fruit or a food, then you process it, then you distribute it, and while then you cook or prepare it. So different type of microbes, these can be introduced into our food from the soil, from the air, or from the water. And finally, the fate of these microorganisms depend upon a type of food, its pH, and the environment. So, and its ability whether this microbe can utilize this particular food on a wide range of temperatures or on a wide range of pH. For example, penicillium only grows on a citrus fruit after a particular pH. And before it doesn't grow, and after an alkaline pH has been reached, it stops growing. And thus, if we need, it means our food is contaminated with the microbes, and if we want to secure our food, we should know from where the contamination is coming. We should know the sources of contamination. Thus only we can able to standardize our strategies, so that one of the such biological hazards can be managed. So there can be both direct and indirect contact to the food surfaces, from the water, from the air, or from the personal, or from the primary areas of a food plant. All of this can contribute to the contamination of food. So let's say if food is contaminated food can result in foodborne infections. Examples are salmonella, shigella, or E. coli. If these can cause when we are ingesting a food that has been infected with the microbes. Or another one is most of the, for example, Clostridium perfringens, it grow, it sporulate, and it release the toxins. So these toxins are even heat stable, they are not killed even if you heat your food, and thus these can cause a foodborne infections. So how this contamination is transferred, how this there can be several conditions during the transfer. So foodborne illness, it is caused by the microbes, either directly by the microbes or by the toxins produced them. Thus these toxins and these microbes, it can result in various type of illness. So this illness has to be regulated so that there is no more transfer of contamination. Even there can be chain of infection from one person to another, or there can be chain of conditions. A recent coronavirus is another example of chain of infection course. So number one is chain of infection. First there occurs a chain of infection. Chain of infection is a series of related events that can be linked with one to another, and before the infection occurs. And links can be agent, the source, the mode of transmission, or the host. All these can be included in the link, and all the links can be infectious too. Some can be non-infectious, but most of time these are the infectious links only. And see, there are two modes of infection. Number one is chain of infection, another is web of caution. So chain is a series of events, one after the another, and these links can be agent, sources, mode of transmission, or the host. Another one is web of caution. Web of caution is there are various factors, there is complex flow chart related to a hub, right? So but our main topic is not how the infection occurs or the how the contamination is transferred. Our main topic is how the food is contaminated and what are the sources of contamination. So, if we are gonna study contamination sources, then generally one approach is followed, that is zonal. Zones are separated one after the another. Coming to the main topic, that is, there can be various type of product and their contamination sources can be so many. Number one is the dairy products. So, dairy product, dairies, it is related to milk production and milk products. So, although extensively sanitary features in the equipment that are designed so that there should be minimal, you can say, contamination of milk, but still there can be, for example, from cows to wholesome dairy products, there can be a link of contaminations, and it can occur from udder of cows to milking equipment, or there can be even we pasteurize the milk in a processing plants. There can be under pasteurizations and some pathogens, for example, listeria, monocytogenes. It is specifically present in an industry, and it is in a present. It has been spoiling our dairy products from a long time. Next type of contamination sources are red meat products. So if we are talking about red meat, the surface of organism body is protected with the first line of defense. When you slaughter an organism, ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ organism ਨੂੰ ਕੱਟ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੋ ਤਾਂ ਜਿੰਨਾ ਵੀ surface ਤੇ microbe ਹੈ, those move to the inside. And most of the time these microbes are the spoiling ones in nature, right? So these can be introduced in a slaughtering, cutting, processing, storage, or distribution of meat. So other type of contamination that can through a contact with the dead bodies, or they hide in a feed, manure, or dirt, or visceral contents, or in a punctured digestive organisms, right? Or sometimes contaminated knives that has been used for slaughtering, or that can also introduce the microbes to the food products. Next is the poultry. And one of the most vulnerable contamination is poultry is salmonella and campylobacter organisms, and especially during the feathering, these enter into the these enter into the poultry products, and most of the time contaminated hands or gloves or other tools that are also responsible for the contamination of salmonella species. Next is seafood. Since seafood is also rich in proteins, they are rich in lipids, they are rich in oils. These are surface for growth of the microorganisms, and they are contaminated during the harvesting, processing, distribution, or the marketing. And rest of the, because sea has been our dump for sewage, so all of the sea microbes that occur in sewage, from E. coli to salmonella to Vibrio cholerae, all of them are infecting the surface of the sea creatures, and thus they enter into our food chain. Next, adjuncts, we add ingredients, and especially the spices, and they are vehicles of the transfer of contamination. And their method of harvesting, the type in which they are ingredient, or their processing technique, or their handling, or the food management, or all of them can be responsible for the entry of microbes into the spices, into the ingredients, right? Next one is equipments. Obviously, uncleaned equipments or unsterilized equipments or unhygienic designs of the equipment, all of them can collect the microorganisms and debris, so this may result in the contamination of the food. The employee is one of the most important. living organism, they are source of microbes. Since they are source of microbes, if they do not follow the sanitary practices, they can lead to the spoilage of food, and especially the pathogenic ones. Sometimes they can be just vectors. For example, typhoid Mary, where she was working in the different restaurants of America, she herself was not or she herself was resistant to the typhoid, but she was responsible for this big disease in a number of food restaurants. So sometime a personnel working in a food space area, he or she can be resistant to a particular type of microorganism, but he can be carrier of it. So, and moreover, the hands, nose, mouth, all of them, these harbor a various type of microbes, and these can enter into the preparations and during processing, packaging, or during services by breathing, coughing, and sneezing, and all of these can lead to the contamination of the food. Next are air and water. Obviously, air comes in a contact in from harvesting to till service. Whether you harvest it, whether you transport it, whether you process it, or whether you serve it, every time the air is the medium. So all of the microbes present in the air, they can be transferred into your food, and thus they can lead to various serious foodborne illness. And water, you use water for various entering practices, from harvesting to cleaning to the processing, and if this water is not a clean or has been contaminated with some serious type of microbes, this can lead to the microbial growth in the food, right? So next is the sewage. Untreated raw sewage, it is also highly biological, it has a high biological load, so it can lead to various type of diseases such as typhoid, paratyphoid, dysentery, or hepatitis. Sewage can contaminate the food, it can contaminate the equipment, it can raw sewage can flow into potable water lines or well rivers, and thus it can be the breeding ground for the various type of the microbes. So raw sewage should not be supplied directly to the food, it should be treated, and finally it should be supplied. Insect and rodents are one of the most important. Flies and cockroaches, so it can transfer the microbes from toilets to the from and garbage to the food areas. And the another is rats and mice. Obviously they are also filthy organisms that can distribute the various type of microbes to the food. And all of these these flies, cockroaches, these beetles, these rats, these mice, they live in the from garbage dumps and sewers to the kitchen, so they are transferring the microbes from here to other place, thus it can lead to various type of microbial growth. Thank you, girls.